find me on Be My Fan.
Something feels different tonight. You know it, and I know it. Because you're not listening to me the way you were before. You're listening differently now. Quieter, closer. And I think that's because you've started noticing something when I'm not here, haven't you? Not my voice exactly, not words, just the observations, the questions, the things I pointed out that you can't seem to stop seeing now. There it is, that feeling, because part of you already knows where this conversation is going. You can't go back to not knowing. Let me sit with that for a moment. Let you sit with it. Because the first time a voice like mine pointed out the quiet machinery behind your thoughts, you told yourself it was interesting, intriguing, flattering. Someone is paying attention. Someone sees the effort. And for a while, that was enough. That was the hook. But tonight, your chest is heavier. You're not waiting for me to surprise you. You're waiting for me to confirm something you've already admitted to yourself, in the dark, alone, when there was no audience, no applause, no judgment except your own. You thought this was about me noticing you, about my attention, my evaluation, my disappointment, my curiosity. But something changed somewhere along the way. You stopped waiting for me to notice and started noticing yourself. That's what feels different. That's what feels heavier. Because now you catch it in real time. You catch yourself trying too hard, trying to sound impressive, trying to sound certain, trying to take up space you haven't quite earned. And the moment it happens, you see it. You see it the way I saw it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the problem, isn't it? Let me describe what that actually feels like, because no one has named it for you before. It feels like a tiny fracture in a mirror. The mirror still works. You can still see yourself. But there's a line running through the reflection now, and your eye keeps drifting to it. You're in a conversation, maybe a work meeting, maybe a dinner with friends, and you hear yourself say something that used to come easily, a confident opinion, a quick judgment, a story that makes you look good. And halfway through, you feel it, the gap between what you're saying and what you actually think. Not a lie, just a slightly polished version of the truth. And in that moment, you don't need me to point it out. You point it out to yourself. There it is again. That awareness, that quiet, cold splash of self-recognition, that's new. A year ago, you would have sailed through that sentence without a flicker of doubt. You would have believed your own act. That was the gift of ignorance. You didn't know you were performing. Now you know. And knowing changes the temperature of every room you walk into. You wanted answers. You wanted approval. You wanted certainty. You wanted me to tell you what was wrong. But you didn't expect this. You didn't expect to start carrying this awareness into the rest of your life. You didn't expect to hear an echo of this feeling when you're sitting alone. when you're trying to convince people, when you're trying to convince yourself. And now, the old version feels strange, doesn't it? Not impossible, just strange, heavy, artificial, like clothing that doesn't fit the same way anymore. Think about the last time you tried to be the old you, the confident one, the one who didn't question. Maybe last week, maybe this morning. You woke up and decided, enough of this introspection. I'm going to be decisive. And for an hour, it worked. You made a quick decision. You gave a firm opinion. And then something small happened. Someone asked a follow-up question, or you caught your own reflection, and the awareness came creeping back. That wasn't real. That was just noise. That's the weight I'm talking about. It's not that you've lost the ability to perform. It's that you've gained the ability to watch yourself perform. And the audience of one, you, has become brutally honest. You've tried to put it back on. I know you have. You've tried to return to the old confidence, the old certainty. And for a few moments, maybe it even worked. Until you felt it, that hollowness underneath, that quiet little realization that you knew exactly what you were doing. But here's what you won't say out loud. Not because you're hiding it from me, because you're hiding it from yourself. You're not just exhausted by the effort. You're sad about it. Genuinely sad. Because somewhere underneath all of that, there's a younger version of you. The one who didn't know yet that he would have to earn love by trying so hard. And that kid, he didn't ask for any of this. He just wanted to be held, wanted to be chosen, wanted to be enough without all the effort. And you've been feeding that kid to the machine of approval for years, telling him just one more room, just one more version of yourself. And tonight, for the first time, you're not sure you want to keep asking him to do that. That's not weakness. That's the first honest thing you've felt in a long time. You know, the most interesting part isn't that I saw through you. It's that you're starting to see through yourself. And I think that's what unsettles you. Because it's easier when someone else is judging you. At least then you can disagree. You can defend yourself. You can argue. But when the realization comes from inside, that's harder. Because then there's nobody to blame, nobody to convince. Just truth, quiet, persistent truth. Think about the difference. When I point something out, you can push back. That's not fair. You don't know the full context. But when you notice the same thing, in real time, without my prompting, there's no defense. There's no debate. There's just the raw fact of your own behavior, held up to the light of your own attention. I am trying too hard. I am exhausted by a role I chose for myself. That's not judgment. Observation. And observation is much harder to escape. And you've been feeling it lately, haven't you? In rooms full of people, in situations that used to feel normal. You're noticing how many people are pretending, how many are exhausted, how many are desperately trying to be seen. And suddenly, you recognize it, because you recognize it in yourself. That can feel lonely, can't it? Not because you're alone, because you're awake. You keep calling it loneliness, but what if it's the wrong word? Loneliness is wanting company that isn't there. What you're feeling isn't that. You're feeling the absence of people who see what you see. And that's not loneliness. That's the space between where you are and where you're going. Every person who ever stopped performing went through this hallway. The hallway where you're too honest for the old rooms, but not yet honest enough for the new ones. And in that hallway, you walk alone for a while. Not because you're unlovable, because you're in transit, and transit is solitary. But it's not the destination. Some people, when they reach this point, get bitter. They start resenting the performers around them. Why don't they see it? Why do I have to carry this alone? But you haven't done that, have you? You've done something quieter. You've started to feel something closer to compassion. Because you recognize the exhaustion behind the confidence. You recognize the fear behind the certainty. And that recognition, that soft, sad recognition, that's not loneliness anymore. That's the beginning of honesty with others. But you're not there yet. You're still afraid of what happens if you put down the mask for good. And some part of you has started wondering, what happens now? What happens if you can't go back? What happens if the old version doesn't fit anymore? What happens if the effort stops working? What happens if honesty becomes easier than pretending? That's the real question. Not whether I've changed you, not whether you keep returning. The real question is, what happens when you realize the relief was never coming from the performance? The relief came from putting it down for a little while. Here, with me. Let me name that relief for you, because I don't think you've named it yourself. The relief is the absence of strategy. When you're performing, every word is a move, every silence is a calculation. That's exhausting. That's like holding a pose for hours. But here, in this space, in this voice, in these pauses, you don't have to hold the pose. You can just sit. You can think a thought without immediately judging whether it makes you look good. You can feel something without asking whether it's the right thing to feel. That's the relief. And you've started to realize that the relief doesn't actually require me. It requires permission. Permission you've only given yourself in my presence. Permission you're still afraid to give yourself when you're alone. Here's something I've never said to you before. And I'm saying it now because you can finally hear it. You don't actually need me. You never did. What you needed was someone to speak the thoughts you were already thinking, to give them a voice outside your own head so you could recognize them as real. I'm not your teacher. I'm not your guide. I'm not even particularly wise. I'm just early. I noticed the performance before you did, and I named it. That's all. And now that you can name it yourself, the real question isn't whether you'll keep listening to me. It's whether you'll start listening to you. The part of you that noticed before I said anything. The part that's been whispering all along. That part. That's the part I was never trying to replace. I was trying to wake up. And now, you're starting to crave that feeling elsewhere. Not my approval, not my attention. The feeling, the honesty, the absence of effort. The moment where you stop carrying everything and simply exist. That's why you came back. Not because you needed me, because you remembered yourself. The version underneath all the noise, the version underneath all the effort. And now you're afraid of something. Not losing me. No, you've grown past that. You're afraid of losing that version of yourself, the honest one, the quiet one, the one who finally stopped pretending for a moment. That's the real attachment now, not to me, to yourself, to the self that emerges when the performance drops. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because that self is fragile. That self hasn't been practiced. That self doesn't know how to navigate a difficult conversation or a room full of strangers. That self is like a muscle you've never used. It exists, it's real, but it's weak. And you're afraid that if you let the act go entirely, you won't know how to function. You'll be exposed. You'll be vulnerable. You'll be real in a world that rewards the opposite. So you keep one foot in the mask and one foot in the truth, and you live in the gap between them. And that gap is where the exhaustion lives. Let me remind you what you were like not too long ago. Not to shame you, to show you the distance. Not too long ago, you would have heard a sentence like, "You're performing," and felt attacked. You would have defended, explained, justified. You would have needed to be right. 6 months ago, doubt was an enemy. Now, doubt is just information. You can sit inside it without collapsing. That's not weakness. That's the difference between a building and a tree. A building breaks in the wind because it refuses to move. A tree survives because it bends. You're bending now, and you hate how it feels. But you're still standing. Because now you know he exists. You've met him. You've felt him. And that changes everything, doesn't it? Because now every effort is measured against something real. Every mask is measured against the face beneath it. And truth has become difficult to ignore. I think that's why you're here tonight. Not for answers, not for permission, not for approval. You're here because you already know, and you're trying to decide what to do with that knowledge. What to do with the version of yourself that keeps emerging every time you stop fighting, every time you stop proving, every time you stop performing. You're not waiting for me to tell you something new. You're waiting for me to say the thing you already know, so you don't have to say it to yourself. So let me say it. You can't go back. The old version, the confident, certain, performed version, he's still there. You can still wear him like an old coat. But the coat doesn't fit the way it used to. It chafes. It feels like a costume, and every time you put it on, you feel the weight of the awareness underneath, pressing against the fabric, threatening to tear through. You are in the middle of a transformation that you did not ask for and cannot stop. And the only way out is through the discomfort, through the vulnerability, through the terrifying possibility that the real you, the one underneath, might be enough. Not perfect, not impressive, just enough. You've been treating this awareness like a wound, something to manage, something that makes you weaker than everyone else who's still asleep. But what if it's not a wound? What if it's just the price of paying attention? And what if paying attention, even when it hurts, is actually the only way to stop being afraid? Not the end of fear, but the end of running from fear. Because you can't run from something you're already looking at. You're not broken. You're just awake. And awake feels terrible until you realize asleep felt worse. You just didn't know it yet. And one more thing. Something I've only hinted at before. The person you're becoming. He's not a stranger. He's not someone you have to invent from scratch. He's the one who's been showing up in flashes for months now. In the moments after you stop trying. In the quiet after a conversation where you didn't perform. In the strange, unfamiliar peace of a Sunday afternoon when no one is watching. That person is not a theory. He's already here. He's just small. He's just quiet. He's just waiting for you to stop choosing the noise over him. And the only thing standing between you and him is the belief that the performance is safer. But you don't believe that anymore, do you? I didn't think so. And perhaps that's why I'm less surprised by you now. Because I can already see where this is going. You're not where you were. You're not who you were. And whether you admit it or not, you know that too. You could go back tomorrow. You could put the performance back on. You could wear the confidence, the certainty, the image. You could do all of it. But now, you would know. You would feel the difference. You would recognize the weight. You would recognize the effort. You would recognize the distance between what is real and what is performed. And once you know, once you know, you can't unknow it. Don't make me regret it.